Well, good afternoon, Scott Baker. We're speaking about the field note for Friday, July 25th.
And the title for this one is Creating an Appetite for Feedback. And this is where the chef who's creating the appetite here is also part of the whole process, because a leader that wants people to get feedback in the organization, they want to be eager for it, they have to demonstrate it themselves.
Right. So we took time to talk about asking for feedback in another field note. And it was kind of a famous story that we've referenced a time or two, specifically about Sheryl Sandberg. And it comes up in the book that she wrote. And she recounts a time when she was being interviewed by Tom Brokaw. And at the end of the interview, she thought it wasn't up to my normal performance is how I did it. And so she asked Tom Brokaw for help. And she recounts in the story how Tom Brokaw was stunned because in all his years of doing interviews, the way that Sheryl Sandberg recounts the story, he never had people asking him for feedback. And he may have had one or two, but the fact is that, it was so rare, he needed to comment back to Sheryl Sandberg what a rare thing it was for him to have somebody ask him for feedback at that point.
Yeah. Well, and at the heart of this at the heart of this field note is the idea that feedback being important, that a leader is really, if they're creating this appetite, going to be asking for feedback, which they usually are actually doing that in the wrong way. Right. They're going to be acting on that feedback, and that requires a couple of specific steps. And then they're going to actually make a third step, and they're going to tell people the result, the impact, the influence of that. Now, we can walk all through three of these. The difference here that's different from Sheryl doesn't work for Tom Brokaw. It's nice to ask somebody for feedback, and that might actually make for a great relationship. But when the person who is in the hierarchy above you is actually taking what you're saying seriously about their own job performance and demonstrating that they're actually doing it, that creates an amazing effect.
It does. And I think what leaders should be going after here is this idea of building reciprocal relationships. I mean, for sure. we bring it up in the field notes specifically about the idea that if I want other people to take my feedback seriously, if I really want to create a culture and an appetite for other people asking for feedback, then, the best way to start a culture is just to start doing it yourself, right? Just start acting that way.
Well, we've had go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, the opportunity to be able to say, I want your feedback. Like, not only do leaders so seldom do it, but it's probably even a lesser degree that they do it, with their team, where they're asking with a specific goal in mind. And so doing it in this third way, where you're asking it with all those things that you mentioned in mind, that, we're really asking for it, we're going to act on it. And then the most important thing is to circle back to let the person know how I acted on it when I heard it, which is something we should do all the time, but especially in this situation. Of course, it'll be remarkable because so few people actually do this on a regular basis.
Yeah. Well, and I'll give you a great example, it kind of involving, we have a long history with the Knowledge Project podcast that Shane Parrish does over at Farnham Street. And he and I had an interaction, and I'll explain that, but I want to kind of set it up by, let's go ahead and look at the pieces of the field note in terms of what it would mean to do this in an authentic way. Because even if you're saying I'm asking for feedback, well, what does that mean? Because, I could say, how did I do, right?
Yes.
I'm just fishing for compliments here at this point. When you're asking for something that is, what could I do better? Where did I fall short? Was there something that was particularly good? Because that also is important. It's not just a matter of getting feedback around negatives, because we talk about leaders when they're giving feedback that they need, if the feedback about the negative is going to land, you need to be very specific and vivid about what went right. We should also be asking for it in the same way. That also just makes people, there's a teaching moment moment in that too, because as you're asking for specific things about was executed in a meeting, in a project, you're opening yourself up. That's creating the reciprocal relationship, but you're also teaching people about what the level of detail looks like and where it matters. When you're like, oh, my leader was seeking this out, you're making them apprentices of what the process of feedback should look like. Now, does that make sense?
It does. It makes a lot of sense. I feel like there's a whole separate field note that could be written specifically around the idea of asking for feedback without fishing for compliments.
Yes,
because I think a lot of people would wonder if that's exactly what you're doing here. And there's a lot of people who might have that mindset as this humble way to ask for compliments when you're really just pretending to ask for feedback.
Yeah, there's a lot of leaders who would do it, just do the easy brush off way of saying this. And it sounds, hey, I'm a good leader. I'm asking for feedback. Kind of in the same way that they would get up and say, well, we just won this big contract and I'm so happy about this team. I couldn't have done it without you. And you really think, yeah, you probably think you could have done it without us, and you're just trying to be nice in the room. But different situation, like the one that you had, the other day with Steph Curry, very specifically praising the team equipment manager, and that changes the dynamic when it's not just a little brush off. Because we often think that leaders, whether they're saying, how did I do, or even if they say, I'm sorry that I when they're apologizing for something, they're like, I'm so sorry that I offended people. I actually don't think you're sorry. You have to have some level of granularity in all of this that makes that real. So whether you're asking, now the question is, how are you acting? Because you can say, I heard it, I feel it, it's all up in here. But unless we start to see it, we don't believe it.
No, that's absolutely true. And if you're going to try to start this in your organization or on your team, to make sure that it's a culture. Again, the title of the field note is to create an appetite for this kind of thing. If you're not going to act on it, the asking about it doesn't matter. And people are going to be looking. The first time that you actually ask for feedback and people are wondering whether or not you're just fishing for a compliment, and then they actually take the time to risk their own relationship, to say something that is honest, to say something that might hurt a little bit, right? I know that you're asking for it, but I don't really know if you're ready for my critical thought here. Let me go ahead and give you a kind thought first. But the critical thought is this, and I don't know what you're going to do with it, right? Until they actually act on it, it takes like the full cycle for people to realize this person really meant that when he wanted to know what he did wrong and what he could do better at.
Well, and one of the things that's also interesting in the asking and then acting and then now telling, right, the explaining of how you actually put something into practice, which, by the way, is an influential behavior even outside of this scenario. You might not have gotten feedback from somebody, and you've come to them and you've said, I took that idea and I put that into I watched how you did this, and now I've tried to do that, and here's what's happened as a result. That's really powerful. Sometimes you can do that even if you encounter somebody who is an author that you've met, or you say something. We would think of it in that sense. We'll just start doing that all day long. I do think that in the way that we approach people, sometimes you can make this very subtle. It doesn't have to be a thing like, I'm going to ask for your feedback now, right? And it doesn't even have to be like all right, I know I led the town hall as the new CEO, and I'd really like to know, what could I have done better, right? I think what you do is you try to make, in the same way that we talk about just bringing down the levels of power and the position that you're in, I think you can just start to make it a matter of they're not minor questions, but they're sort of almost offhand questions. Like, when we got to the Q&A, I did feel like I was actually addressing that very thorny question that came up. But I'm a little worried that maybe it came off as a little bit, as a little too brief. I don't know if you had that sense, right? Now, if I bring up like an issue like that, and I'm asking the head of my communications department, which would be a natural person to ask, but I'm also asking, other people in the C-suite or whatever it is, that's not kind of like trying to say, I'm going to demonstrate that I'm open to feedback so that you also will be open to feedback. Because I've made it something, this is a very natural question. And then if they actually answer, then I go into another question. And then I go into another question. I did like how, and it felt to me like that landed. I'm not sure if that story that I told had the impact. I've used that before. Do you feel like that resonates? Do I need to do more of that? So now I'm asking for some more of or less of feedback. And I'm making it so, natural that you might not even know that there's a dynamic happening. And that ultimately is the point, which is it should not be that ask and act and tell are just sort of this little triple play that you use to try to create this effect so that finally everybody's going to be open to my feedback because I did this little trick on you. That it's just the way that you do things. It's part of who you are authentically as a leader.
Yes. And it really comes down to the reason that you're doing this in its most basic form is because you want there to be a lower resistance to the ideas that you're eventually going to be giving as a leader. And so what better way to lower resistance than to think about the nature of your relationship with this person to begin with? Yeah. And that's why I think this behavior is so fantastic, is because it addresses this in a holistic way. Yeah. It could be ingested as a tactic. We don't want it to be. It could be thought of as just like this quick little hack that we don't want it to be. But in terms of like the way you want your leadership to be anyway, the most well-respected, least amount of resistance that's given to it, you want this reciprocal kind of relationship. And what better way for you to feel like, for your team to feel like you are elevating them to the point where you have a reciprocal relationship with them. It's powerful. Like if someone were to do that to me, even if it was a skip level, especially if it was a skip level, I would feel like, oh, this is fantastic that I have this kind of relationship, right? And the other thing that the byproduct of this is that if you are able to develop this, you actually get real and honest feedback from people, right?
Oh,
or otherwise you might not, right? You have a quick trip up in an elevator and you happen to be with someone who is a skip level different from you. They're not going to tell you the truth. They're not going to look for those opportunities to do that. They'll have no way to do that. They need you as a leader to kind of crack the door open like this. And then once the door is open, you have to prove it, which is this methodology is perfect for that. And then it just does everything in the right way. This is super powerful, right?
Yeah.
And by the way, it's not super powerful if you do it one time. This is especially super powerful if this is the way you live. If this
consistency.
Is the way you just practice this.
Well, here's how the Shane Parrish feedback session went. So, when we first launched Admired Leadership 5 years ago, Shane did an episode of The Knowledge Project with our founder, Randall Stutman. And that was a terrific interview. Even 5 years later, it is a great encapsulation of the kind of philosophy and approach of Admired Leadership. And probably, I would say probably 1,000 people that have come to Admired Leadership, not to just the field notes, but I mean like actually became clients or customers of our content, came because of that interview, and it consistently still performs. Now, after that interview, and then we later became actually sponsors of that podcast because it was such a powerful impact and dynamic. And I remember, and I actually don't even think it was that interview. I think that I was talking with Shane, who I've never met in person. Obviously, he doesn't work for me. I don't work for him. This was a peer-to-peer kind of conversation. But in the conversation about whether it was that podcast or another one, he said, what could I do better? And I didn't give sort of a fast answer. I thought about it and I said, I know that you're not a confrontational interviewer, but I think sometimes with some of the guests that you have, I'd like you to press in on some things that maybe the audience is skeptical about, or I'm not sure about this. And so is there a way to introduce, some of the kind of, grill them a little bit? And he said, well, I've worried about that because I don't want to look like that they have asked them on and now I'm going to debate them. And so my feedback and suggestion was this. I said, take it outside of yourself. Take it that it's not Shane saying this. Say, well, what do your critics say about your approach? Or I've noticed that there are some people that have taken you on in this area. Tell me more about your response there. So it's not you pressing the guest, right? You've moved it into a third person scenario, and that allows you to raise something which actually is helpful to the interview. It actually makes them better, that you're actually creating tension is where really interesting things happen in any conversation. And so it doesn't mean that the interview itself has to be combative, but you have the opportunity to create it. So that was the feedback I gave him. It was very specific. And he was just asking for what could I do better. It wasn't specifically around, I feel like my questions ramble on too long or something like that. You could ask a question that way. That's the feedback I gave him. Now, how he's incorporated that, I think I've listened over the years, and I think there probably are elements of that in there. But here's the thing. Maybe he remembers it. Maybe he doesn't. Here's the thing. It's kind of the Tom Brokaw effect with Sheryl Sandberg, which is I was amazed that he asked me. And years later, I still remember that fact, which shows you that if you start to do this, you will have the same impact on other people.
Right. And we're not bringing this up to call Shane out that he didn't necessarily.
No, not at all.
Step 2 or step 3.
Oh,
right?
no, he may have, and I'm not saying that he didn't put it into action. But here's the thing, and we can end on this, which is I know that I have been not as attentive to this particular approach as I should be. So for anyone that has watched this episode of Lead Better and you have some thoughts about what Mikey could have done better,
yeah, not Scott, Mikey.
You can email support@admiredleadership.com. You can comment if there's a place to comment, because sometimes this is on different platforms. And you can say, Mikey, I think you could have done this better. And then Mikey can come back on and demonstrate how he's acted on that and what the impact was.
Yes. Why not? Why not?
There you go.
Bring it on. Yeah. All right.
See?
Thank you very much. I enjoyed this. Yeah.
Right.
I enjoyed it. Great conversation. We'll talk again tomorrow. Okay.